Every year, thousands of people drive into the woods of the Pacific Northwest looking for the same thing: quiet. No phones, no traffic, no noise. Mark and Sarah went looking for exactly that. What found them instead is the reason I'm telling you this story today. This is the story of one weekend, one cabin, and one visitor who should not have known how to knock.
Mark and Sarah were a married couple in their 40s, living just outside Seattle. And like a lot of people their age, their lives had quietly turned into a loop of spreadsheets, traffic, and back-to-back video calls. They needed a break, a real one. So when their close friend Dave offered them his private cabin for the weekend, they didn't hesitate. Now, this wasn't some polished vacation rental with a hot tub and a welcome basket. This cabin sat deep inside old-growth forest on the Pacific coastline, set back about a quarter mile from a rugged, isolated stretch of shore. There was no cell signal, no Wi-Fi. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, down an unpaved logging road that most GPS systems didn't even bother mapping.
To Mark and Sarah, that sounded perfect. They arrived Friday afternoon. The air smelled like pine and salt. They unpacked, opened a bottle of wine, and spent the evening by the fireplace, letting the silence do what silence is supposed to do. By 11 o'clock, the forest outside was pitch black, and the only sound left was wind moving through the trees. They went to bed feeling, for the first time in months, completely at peace. That peace lasted exactly until 2:14 in the morning.
Mark woke up to a sound that sent his heart straight into his throat. It wasn't some soft, ordinary woodland noise. It was a violent slam, then another. Then another. Someone, or something, was hitting the bedroom window. Hard. Before Mark could even process what he was hearing, the slamming moved. It shifted from the window to the heavy wooden front door. Something was throwing its full weight against it, again and again, like it was desperate to get inside. Mark grabbed the iron poker from the fireplace. His hands were shaking. Sarah pressed close behind him as they crept toward the living room. Then, suddenly, the slamming stopped. In its place came a frantic, high-pitched scratching at the door. And then, a voice came through the wood. It sounded like a little girl, crying. "Please, help me. It's cold. Let me in." Mark's instinct kicked in immediately. There was a child outside, alone, in the freezing coastal woods. He reached for the deadbolt. Sarah grabbed his arm. "Look out the window first." Mark stepped to the window beside the door and pulled back the curtain. The porch light lit up the figure standing outside. It looked, at first glance, like a little girl, maybe 8 years old, wearing a soiled yellow raincoat. But the longer Mark looked, the more wrong it became. Her skin had a sickly grayish tint, almost translucent, like meat that had been left out too long. Her eyes weren't a child's eyes. They were massive, entirely black, and they reflected the porch light like polished glass. And then there was her jaw. As she repeated the words, "Please, let me in," her jaw didn't move naturally. It dropped open in a stiff, mechanical motion, flapping like a poorly built ventriloquist dummy. The voice didn't even match the movement of her mouth. It sounded like a recording, being played back through something that was never built to speak. Mark stepped back from the window, horrified. He shook his head at Sarah. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They simply refused to acknowledge what was standing on the porch. And the moment it understood they weren't opening that door, the crying stopped. Instantly. In its place came a low, guttural clicking sound. The thing turned. Its head dropped to an unnatural angle, and it sprinted into the dark tree line, on two legs, at a speed that should not have been possible.
Neither Mark nor Sarah slept a single minute for the rest of that night. They sat on the living room floor, staring at the front door, the iron poker still gripped in Mark's hand, until the first gray light of morning finally broke through the trees. The moment it was light enough, they didn't bother packing properly. They threw their things into the SUV, locked up the cabin, and left. All they wanted was the highway, gas stations, cell service, people. The gravel logging road was buried in thick morning fog. Mark kept the high beams on, pushing the SUV as fast as the muddy potholes would allow. Sarah stared out the window at an endless wall of dark pine trees, praying they'd reach civilization soon. They had been driving for about 15 minutes when Mark saw something ahead, standing at the edge of the road.
A figure stood near the tree line, arm outstretched, thumb up, hitchhiking. Mark slowed slightly, trying to make sense of who would be standing out here, alone, at dawn. As the SUV pulled level with the figure, he looked out the side window, and the thing looked directly back at him. It grinned, ear to ear, rows of jagged teeth catching the morning light. Sarah's voice cracked. "Mark, don't stop! Do not stop!" Mark slammed his foot on the gas. The engine roared. Tires spun and spat gravel as the SUV lurched forward. He checked the rearview mirror.
It was running. After them. It was keeping pace with a moving vehicle, its black eyes locked on the back window. Mark swerved around sharp bends, tires screaming against the wet dirt. The trees broke open ahead of them, and the gravel gave way to the smooth black asphalt of State Route 101. The creature stopped dead at the edge of the tree line. Mark didn't look back again. He kept his foot on the floor until they reached a populated town nearly an hour later. Weeks later, Dave went back out to check on the cabin himself. He told Mark the place looked fine. Untouched, really. Except for one detail. Scratched into the front door was a doodle. Crude. Childlike. The kind of thing a kid might scribble with a stick. As if something had spent days trying to carve its way through the wood. If you ever find yourself somewhere remote, somewhere quiet, and you hear something asking to be let in, maybe look out the window first.